Good afternoon, y'all. Grab a cup of coffee, or if you prefer, a cup of tea. I want to dive into some of the implications of the tea app breach that happened about a week ago. In case you aren't aware or haven't heard at all, there was an app called Tea that women were using to basically warn each other about dangerous men in the dating market. It was really designed by a guy whose mom was dating and using online apps, and he was concerned about her safety. She got catfished, may have like gone on dates with a criminal or something like that. But it's basically like, from my understanding, it was originally designed by a son who was concerned about his mother, and this guy seems to be middle-aged, so I'm assuming she's an older woman who's not really familiar with the current dating environment. So that's kind of how the app was designed. But really, it turned into the Mean Girls burn book in real time, and women were using the app to say, defamatory things about men, and it was kind of like an open forum for women to swap stories about men that they had gone on dates with that they weren't too thrilled about. So that app experienced a breach. And what's interesting about it is that this app, and this is becoming a normalized trend with apps, so I would honestly pay attention to this, even if you know nothing about it or didn't use it. This app required you to verify your identity in order to use it. So you had to upload a government-issued ID as well as a selfie of yourself. So all of that information was exposed in the breach. It wasn't just your name or your username or an email address or even a password. It was like your actual information about where you live and that kind of stuff. And someone, I believe, actually made a map with all of the women who used it. And I know another person made a website, kind of like old school Facebook, where you could rank and compare the selfies of the different women who use the app. But I mean, regardless, this is a huge, it's a big deal because we're now normalizing this kind of behavior, and because we're de-anonymizing and making the internet less anonymous. De-anonymizing, is that a word? I may have just made that up. But we're adding verification measures in order to verify identities on the internet. People are what you do is starting to be connected with who you are as a person. There can be real world implications for it. So this is a story I think worth diving into. But what I wanted to talk about today is an essay that was published in my favorite publication, the New York Times, about the Tea app and what happened and what it tells about women culture. Right off the bat, the headline for this article is "Women have always looked out for one another. It's never been risk-free." As a woman, I will use appeal to authority here and say, I don't know that even that first sentence is true. Maybe I'm an anomaly. Maybe most women look out for each other. I've never had experiences where women look out for one another. Like, everyone is so self-absorbed with themselves. I don't know. I've never had an experience where women have gone out of their way to look after one another. I've always found, like when women check to make sure you get home safe after a night out, honestly, women don't usually do that. I've rarely had that happen. But if it did happen, maybe it was more performative, if anything. Like, leave a party and your girlfriend, is like, text me to make sure, let me know you get home safe, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't know. Maybe I had a weird college experience, but that never actually happened. It always felt more performative to me. Like, girls were doing the thing they were supposed to do and conditioned to do to evoke caring for one another. But when it actually, when push comes to shove, casual female friendships and acquaintanceships, I've never experienced it where they'll go out of their way to make sure you're safe. So I'm skeptical of this, that women, I take issue with this. I don't think that women have always looked out for one another. I mean, friends will look out for one another. I'll always look out for, my close friends and my best friend. But I'm not really looking out for other women just because they're women, if that makes sense. Maybe I'm a bad person. I don't know. But I'm not going to the grocery store on the weekend scanning, the parking lot looking for danger because there's other women there and I must warn them to keep them safe. I'm just doing my thing and want to kind of be left alone. So that's my take. But let's dive in. So Right in the beginning, the author says T is an app for women seeking to warn one another about disreputable men in the dating scene. So I want to compare that with the actual T app itself. So if you go to the front page of it's tforwomen.com, it's all about dating safety. So safety is the word they use. And so it's all about creating safety, looking for red flags, talking about those red flags. Right on the get-go, it talks about T was born from a deeply personal mission to give women the tools they need to date safely in a world that often overlooks their protection. So it talks about how the founder launched after witnessing his mother's own experience, again, with catfishing and guys with criminal records. So if anything, my understanding of the intent of this app was to create a mechanism for verifying essentially strangers you might meet with on the internet. And I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense. It's interesting that it only applies to dating and not any sort of other type of app. So, I mean, a good comparison, in the professional world would be LinkedIn. Like how many people use LinkedIn these days, like fake recruiters and stuff like that, use LinkedIn for kind of nefarious purposes. Stuff like that happens. So it's interesting that it's being only applied to dating when there's all sorts of different circumstances in your day-to-day existence where you're interacting with strangers and you don't feel the need to verify who you're interacting with is legit. I don't know, maybe dating apps need background checks or something. I'm just thinking Thumbtack, TaskRabbit. You have all of these app, all the gig economy stuff, right? Uber, Lyft. I know Uber just announced the Uber Women thing where they're going to start matching female passengers with female drivers. That in and of itself is going to be interesting. But we normalized interacting with strangers we don't know that we're connected with through different algorithmic services. And dating is just a piece of that bigger economy. And we've normalized those interactions, but for some reason, dating is more dangerous. I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting to me how normalized it's become. But anyways, the whole point of the T app was to give women a sense of safety, emphasis on the word safety. So in this description, the author talks about what T actually was in practice. So she uses the word disreputable. So according to the internet, the word disreputable means not considered to be respectable in character or appearance. So the example that was given in the dictionary is he was heavy, grubby, and vaguely disreputable. So I see this as a synonym for chopped, or someone who maybe a guy who isn't a criminal per se, but a guy who isn't really well put together, isn't someone who's grubby, someone who's not taking care of themselves, someone who's out in public but isn't really in a state where maybe it's okay to be in public. So maybe someone wearing pajamas and Crocs, for example, showing up to a date in pajamas and Crocs. So I think right off the bat, this conflates this idea of being put together and safety and meshes it in an app. So the app is marketed as a safety tool when in reality it's become a tool for women to gossip about guys they've gone on dates with. And I'm sure some of the stuff they talk about is legitimate, criminal histories and that kind of stuff, but where's the line with what is disreputable, right? The way the Womansphere has kind of organized dating around these arbitrary principles that are super superficial at best. Guys who are six foot tall and make six figures. If you don't meet those qualifiers, are you disreputable? If you're on a dating app and you just have a normal job and a normal life and you're not exceptional, you don't meet the Womensphere standards, are you disreputable? And if you are, is your character up for attack in these private, somewhat private, but in these app-based forums? I think that's an interesting question that's worth asking, because she dives into the next paragraph saying that it's calling out bad behavior. Again, what is bad behavior? Where do you draw the line between the ick and things that women find give them the ick, and what is actually bad behavior? If a guy doesn't pay on the first date, that's a different type of red flag. if you will, than someone who, is actually going to assault you or doing things, putting something in a drink, for example. So I think there's a spectrum and a line. And just because it's something you don't agree with or it doesn't adhere to your personal perception of how men should behave in the dating world doesn't necessarily mean it's bad behavior. And so this is interesting for this kind of app because it kind of gave women a carte blanche to just talk about whatever they wanted to. And I don't know that behavior is good for society. So again, this author appeals to kind of the history of how women have gone through, the difficulties of the dating market and how there's all these personal risks of participating in a familiar practice, protecting other women from cheaters and abusers. Okay, a couple thoughts here. No one is forcing women to protect other women, kind of like I was saying in the beginning of this video. I've never experienced like the reciprocity of me needing to protect and receiving protection from other women. And I think that's because I've really abstained from putting myself into situations where I need protecting in the first place. Like I can count on probably one hand the number of times I've gone out late at night and been out past, 1 a.m. And that, was in my 20s. I just don't behave like that. I've never really been in situations where I had to be concerned. And I think women have instincts and are capable of deciding for themselves what is safe and what is not. And the Womansphere encourages women to subordinate their instincts in order to follow what the group think and what the herd tells them to believe. So, and I do this. I'm guilty of this. I'm not an exception. Like I'll validate ideas and thoughts and opinions with my girlfriends before making a decision. I think that's just a natural part of being a woman is you want feedback and input from others before you make decisions. But kind of stuff like this, like the only reason you're imposing a personal risk on yourself is if you engage in this kind of fodder. If you don't, there's no personal risk involved. You're not gonna, there's no harm to your reputation, no additional mental load or emotional load that you're bearing. Only if you indulge in this. And if you're someone who consistently dates cheaters and abusers and you feel the need to protect other women, that kind of says something about you too. We're creatures of habit. And so if it's your habit to date those types of men, and then you're surrounding yourself with women who also date those types of men, I mean, that speaks to your character as well. So she talks in here how, the internet gave women the opportunity to connect with other women, to talk about these kinds of things. And so the practice of kind of warning against dangerous men in the dating market has expanded into anonymous forums, apps, and even spreadsheets that are shared across the internet. I had no idea there were spreadsheets. I had heard of a spreadsheet, I think on a college campus with I think this was like COVID or around like George Floyd era, with people engaged in like racist behavior. I didn't know women were doing this with dating. That's kind of wild to me. So again, women, there's groups and other forums that the author highlights here, not just, the T app, but where women expose men while sharing stories of infidelity and abuse. I think this is a two-way street, and women only talk about it as victims, and you can see how this essay is written. It talks about it from the victimization aspect of women, how they're victims of infidelity and victims of abuse, but it's a two-way street. Like if you are choosing to enter into relationships with bad men, you are also responsible. Like you can do better. And that's why I think I'm really critical of the feminist argument of, men are just oppressive and they hurt women and yada, yada, yada. And it's like, okay, maybe that's true for some women, but that's not true for all women. And the women who hold themselves to a high standard, that's certainly not true. So I think what this reveals is that women in general have lowered our standards for how we expect men to behave in public. And we've degraded ourselves and what we expect of men so that we no longer hold them up to a high standard. So they're allowed to do this kind of stuff. If, I don't know how rampant this stuff is. I know, stuff happens all the time, but I don't know I don't believe it to be true that all men running around are abusers or that they're out to cheat. Things happen. There's causes to things, and I think women are culpable in it as much as men. I don't think that men are these evil creatures who are just out there trying to harm women. And so, yeah, I think women need to hold themselves up to a higher standard. And once women take ownership of their lives and do that, men will follow. So if women want men to stop behaving poorly, women also need to stop behaving poorly. I mean, it's pretty simple as that. And then, if you want a good, stable relationship, you need to surround yourself with women who emulate that, women who do that. And again, maybe that's why I've never been exposed to this. All my friends are married, have families, and great relationships. So I never had exposure to a lot of this stuff that I think is really normalized in culture. And I'm grateful for that, but I understand too how that kind of has left me a little sheltered, to put it bluntly. Okay, so apparently in 2017, there was a spreadsheet that was put out where women could anonymously accuse men in the media industry of misconduct. So this was around Me Too. This is a huge, huge problem. And it gets to the whole issue with apps like this and anonymized forums, is that we have completely undermined the rule of law in this country. And I do think the Me Too movement played a big role in this, not even just in dating culture, but if you just want to zoom out and look at this from the perspective of the legal system, state institutions, the government, democracy, and Western civilization. Like, we operate on a system where you are innocent until proven guilty. And Me Too completely inverted that. So now all of a sudden, men are guilty until proven innocent. And even when they are proven innocent, they're still guilty. I mean, look at there's the Canada hockey situation right now. And then you can go back to the Duke lacrosse incident back in the mid 2000s. You have examples where men have been set up by women. Women have lied, brought allegations that destroyed lives, and there was no recourse for it. They shouldered no responsibility for the outcome of their actions. And so you have a new operating environment for men where they are hesitant to go on dates. They're hesitant to hire other women. I don't think the Womansphere understands this. Men don't want to hire women. A Harvard Business Review survey was put out, I think in 2019, that talked about this, where they're just hesitant to hire women because they don't want to be seen as harassing those women. And you've seen all of these allegations come out since then where, someone looked at me wrong at a holiday party 20 years ago, and that somehow is, assault. No one wants to be privy to that. So I think stuff like this is a big problem because we've now made men guilty in the court of public opinion, and then the ability to circulate that privately, and I mean publicly too, but somewhat privately, on spreadsheets and behind apps and stuff within the women's sphere. I mean, that has material harm to these men. They're not able to live their lives as they want. They're defamed in some cases. Some have experienced criminal allegations and been convicted of crimes because of it. And then, if you deal with the media industry, you're blacklisted and you can't get work. So yeah, I mean, there's real world consequences for this kind of stuff. And there's no way to verify. And I know the women will be like, trust all women, but there's no way to verify what has actually happened. So I understand things do happen. Women are assaulted. It's a fact of life. I get it. But when women conflate their own regret after giving consent with an actual crime, one, they're doing a disservice to actual victims. But two, they're criminalizing men simply for existing. And that has completely eroded trust in our institutions and the rule of law. And no wonder why men are opting out of marriage and of work and relationships and they're socially isolating, because every aspect of our society, politics even, every aspect of our society has been so hyper feminized that like there's a huge personal risk to the men. It's not even just like this woman in this article talks about it being a personal risk to women who warn other women about the dangers of men. Men have a deep risk of just participating in public life. So many are just opting out because it's frankly safer. So she talks about here how allegations that once would have been shared among friends were suddenly being posted on the internet with government names attached for thousands to see. Again, there's irreparable material harm to that. I'm not saying that men don't do bad things, but we need a process and the rule of law to actually adjudicate those things. And you need to have evidence and support it. You can't just put something out there, put it on the internet, attach a name to it, and say that the person, is guilty. Because the Womansphere is going to condemn them every single time. And I think, like I said, that's done irreparable harm to men. So it talks about an example of a website called don'tdatehimgirl.com that came out in 2006, similar to the kind of like a predecessor to the T app. But the website was criticized in the press for hosting fabricated claims, and the owner of the website faced several lawsuits accusing her of soliciting false and defamatory content. So again, this has happened. This is on the record as happening. You have, like I said, the Duke lacrosse case, but then also the Canada hockey case that's going on right now. Examples of this happening where women make false allegations. It's treated as true. Men face damages and harm to it, and it later comes out that's not true. And it's interesting how this woman was sued for it, and she ended up shutting the website down because she couldn't keep up with all the lawsuits. So it's a huge problem. So the author goes on to say, while some men have undoubtedly been caught up in false or overstated accusations, the instinct that women have to warn one another about harmful men doesn't come out of thin air. Many have experienced abuse, misconduct, infidelity, and general impropriety that kickstarted entire movements, including the Me Too movement. Again, I'm sharing my perspective as a woman who has never really experienced this culture. Maybe, honestly, it's probably because of my upbringing. I was raised in an evangelical Baptist church, and I learned from an early age certain roles and responsibilities for women. And for me, the purpose of dating was always to find a husband. It wasn't just to kind of give everything you have away to the lowest bidder on the market. And I think a lot of women haven't learned that or didn't grow up with that messaging, and they just sell themselves freely on the internet. I think you see proof of this with the proliferation of sites like OF. Women don't hold themselves in high regards. They do things, and I do believe to some extent in the law of attraction. So like if you think of yourself in a lowly place, you're going to attract people that reinforce that into your life. So if you're a woman who thinks you are deserving of infidelity or impropriety, or you're not deserving of the good quality relationship you seek, and that can be subconsciously programmed too. If you came from a broken household and that's all you know, that's all you think you deserve. So I'm not blaming anyone. I understand where it comes from, but there is some, I think, mental and psychological work that has to be done to deprogram that. But I think women who have grown up with that experience then project that into adulthood, and that's what they get back in return. And so I don't know how much of this is genuine, how much of the dating market in the women's sphere is actually because of men doing bad, horrific things. And I don't know how much of it is women kind of manifesting those things in their lives. And I know there's women who are going to take, offense with me saying that, but you can apply it to a career too. If you don't think you earn or deserve a certain level of income or promotion, like your subconscious is going to structure barriers and hurdles for you so that you never achieve what you want to achieve. So if you don't think you're deserving of a high quality relationship, or you don't have anyone who modeled that for you, it makes sense to me why women would sell themselves short and then attract men who reinforce pre-existing narratives they already have and already believe about themselves, and then with the cultural zeitgeist interpret that as misconduct or impropriety or men wanting to do harm, and then sharing it with others and creating this broader narrative through social media and all these apps and these platforms that normalizes it and kind of gives it confirmation bias. I hope that makes sense and people don't take that out of context, but I do think your inner psyche plays a role in the outer world and how you see the world. And if there's a lot of people who have similar beliefs, it creates like a herd mentality. And then if you see confirmation bias within that herd mentality, you believe things to be true that might not actually be true. So yeah, okay. So that's all I have for you on this episode. This was kind of a short article. I don't know. I don't know that apps like this are beneficial. I think they do more harm than good. And frankly, this is really indicative of how the female psyche works and how bad it is. I always say this in my videos, but if you haven't watched Mean Girls, the original Mean Girls with Lindsay Lohan, watch it. It's really a documentary on how girls think and women think. And the problem with our society is you have that culture, because this really is like the burn book from Mean Girls. This is a digital version of the burn book. If you have an adolescent culture like that is mean and cruel, and you have women who biologically age, but they don't also mentally or emotionally mature, this is what you get. This is how you get 30, 40, even 50 plus year old women using apps like this or creating their own networks to share potentially defamatory information amongst one another, because they just haven't matured or evolved themselves. So I think apps like this are a symptom of a much bigger social problem. I think women collectively have a lot of work to do. Obviously need to grow up and mature, need to set higher standards for themselves, need to overcome those psychological and mental hurdles I was talking about. But women need to take ownership over their own choices. And yeah, there are bad guys out there. Not everyone is a bad guy. And I was reading through some of the stuff on this app and the reviews, and they have like a huge testimonial page, and I don't know. Like, this is just a culture. This person, I had a very bad ex who was abusive to me. His spouse is before me, and I've been contacted by the ones after me, and he's still in and out of jail for domestic abuse. Like, why would you ever date someone who did that? Maybe I'm naive. But if you have someone who has a rap sheet, a literal rap sheet, and who's done bad things, like, that's also kind of on you, to not date those people and not give those guys, the opportunities at the expense of good guys who you might, dismiss and overlook because they're not as reputable as you think they are. So yeah, it's just, I don't know, interesting to me that women find it acceptable to talk about this kind of stuff, and basically it's gossip. Yeah, I'm like, it helps you figure out the tea on if you are dating the same guy. It also has an option to do background checks and shows a map of predators in your area. Like, again, maybe I'm naive, but if you suspect a guy is not going to be faithful or is dating another woman simultaneously as you, like, trust your instinct. I think social media is really depriving women of this, or not learning how to be intuitive and in touch with ourselves. Your gut tells you the right things all the time. So I would say learn how to trust your gut. Don't listen to what other women say. Other women aren't out there for your benefit. Other women are out there competing with you in the dating market. So they're going to put you down in order to elevate themselves and raise themselves up. So I'd be curious to know what you think of this app. I can't imagine like the Manosphere coming up with a comparable app. If they did, oh my heavens, they would get ripped to shreds. So it's the double standard here that women are allowed to have this kind of stuff and men aren't is also indicative of a much broader problem in society. But I'd be curious to know what you think if you've been following this whole T app breach saga, and what you think about the requirements or the obsession with women to warn other women. And if you've had an experience yourself where this has actually caused harm in your life, I'd be curious to know what you think about it. And, if there are any benefits to apps like this. I don't know. Like I said, I'm a bit of an anomaly. So Okay. I appreciate you for watching this video. If you found it helpful or informational and like the commentary, I'd love it if you would like and subscribe. That'll help me build out this channel. And I'll see you in the next video.